Hi there, this is going to help you work on your review sheet for the final. This particular video is going to go over numbers 1 through 20, so be sure you have your review sheet out. Alrighty, the first question asks you to decide the difference between anatomy and physiology, since that is the name of the course. So remember that anatomy is the study of structures. So, when you learn the bone names, the parts of the brain, that kind of stuff, that is the anatomy. So anatomy is the study of structures, whereas physiology is the study of how it works or how it functions, however you want to write it. So when we talk about what stuff does, we talk about the pathway of neurons sending messages, that would be the physiology. But then when we talk about the structure of the neuron, that would be anatomy. Second question, describe what the body looks like in anatomical position. So remember that the body is erect, and all that means is the body is standing up as opposed to sitting down. Everything is facing forward, so eyes, feet, everything faces forward. And then remember your arms are down by your side, arms down by your side. And then the last thing, remember your palms are facing up. So the body is erect, standing straight up. Everything is facing forward, so your eyes, your feet, everything is looking ahead. Arms are down by your side, and palms are up. Question 3 asks you to list the 5 things that humans need to survive. So this should be one of those questions that you should be able to recognize, like which one doesn't belong. So number 1, we need oxygen. We've got to be able to breathe. Number 2, we need water. You can only live so many days without water. So we got to have oxygen, water, nutrients. So we got to have food. Got to consume calories and stuff to get energy. We have to be able to have a regular body temperature. So remember, in humans, that is about 98.6 degrees, or about 37 degrees Celsius. So we've got to be able to maintain it within a proper range. We don't want to get too hot or too cold. And then the last thing is atmospheric pressure. So this is the idea that we couldn't live, on the top of a massive mountain. The oxygen would be not present enough, the pressure would be too great, and we wouldn't be able to breathe. So we got to have oxygen, water, nutrients, a stable or regular body temperature, and proper atmospheric pressure. Number 4 asks you to know these directional terms. So we'll go through this list. Remember, superficial means close to the surface. So I could say that my skin is superficial to my bones. It's closer to the surface. So obviously deep is just the opposite. So it is farther away from the surface. Farther away from the surface. Proximal and distal go together. So anything that is proximal is closer to the attachment point. So closer to the attachment point. Remember, you have 4 basic attachment points. You have 2 at your shoulders, so where your shoulders connect to your main body, and then where your leg bones connect to your hip. Those are your 4 attachment points. So I could say that my elbow is proximal to my wrist, because my elbow is closer to that point at my shoulders than my wrist is. And then distal is just the opposite. It is farther from the attachment point. So I could say, farther from the attachment point. I could say that my fingers are distal to my elbow because my fingers are further away from that shoulder joint. Or I could say my ankle is distal to my knee. Medial just means closer to the middle. Closer to the middle. And then lateral is farther from the middle. Now keep in mind what middle is. If you were to divide your body into left and right sides perfectly in the center, that would be the middle. So if it's closer to the middle, it's closer to that line that's dividing yourself into like a mirror image, like a left and right side. And then if it's further from that point, it would be lateral. The other two terms that you need to be sure you know are contralateral and ipsilateral. So contralateral means on opposite sides of the body. Opposite sides of the body. And then ipsilateral means the same side of the body. So I could say that my left leg and right arm are contralateral, or I could say my left leg and my left arm are ipsilateral. So same side of the body is ipsilateral. Contralateral means opposite sides of the body. The part of the feedback system that receives input and generates an output command, this is the control center. So if you remember homeostasis, like keeping your body in check, keeping it stable, it has three parts. It has a receptor is going to sense a change, send that to a control center, they decide what to do, and then it sends it out to an effector. But the control center actually receives that message and decides how to respond. And most of the time, that's just your brain. What anatomical region contains the navel? That is your umbilical. Hopefully I spelled that right. Your umbilical region is your navel, your belly button. Question 7, if you have an itch in your axillary region, you would be scratching your armpit. And then question 8, where would you find your femoral artery? That would be your thigh. Now these are coming, question 9 asks you to know all your regional terms. These are on page 16 and 17 in your book, and they are also some green flashcards you should have early on in your notebook. And these are all the regional terms, you know, the fancy way of describing a body part. So be sure you take a look at these, but this is just a quick review of those. Question 10 asks what body plane divides it into superior and inferior. Remember, superior is the top and inferior is the bottom. So this would be a transverse plane, would divide your body into top and bottom. And then the second part of the question is asking for what plane divides the body into left and right sides, and that would be a sagittal plane. Question 11, what body system is the fast-acting response system of the body? That would be your nervous system. Remember, it uses a system of nerves and impulses to get messages throughout the body very, very quickly. Question 12 asks what body system helps regulate temperature and protects the body. That is our most recent system that we did, and remember that is the integumentary system, which includes your skin, your hair, your nails, and all your glands. Well, not all your glands, but your oil and sweat glands. Okay, so that is question 12, is integumentary system. Describe cardiac muscle. Okay, so a couple of things. It's only found in the heart. So it's only found in the heart. It is branching, or you could also say Y-shaped. Okay. So it's only found in the heart. It's branching. Okay. It is involuntary. Luckily, you don't have to think about it. It automatically will contract. It'd be terrible if you had to think about contracting your heart muscle all the time. And the other thing that it has that's kind of interesting is it has intercalated disc. And all these do is help strengthen the heart. You have to keep in mind your heart is beating constantly your whole life. So it has to have some extra strength to it, and that is an intercalated disc. And just one more thing I'm going to add up here. Sorry, I ran out of space. It just has a single nucleus. So we'll talk about some types of muscles that have multiple nuclei, but this one just has one. Okay. The tissue type that lines body cavities, remember, is your epithelium. The type of tissue that's highly specialized for contraction, that would be muscular. And the tissue that helps support and protect body organs, stores energy, and provides immunity is your connective tissue. So these are just your basic tissue types. Blood is actually a type of connective tissue, and its matrix is actually made out of plasma. So its matrix is actually liquid. It's one of the few connective tissues that has a liquid matrix. The cells, question 16, the cells of cartilage are known as chondrocytes. I feel like there's an R there. Chondrocytes, anytime you see the prefix chondro, it has to do with cartilage, and they occupy fancy spaces called lacunae. Fun word. Question 18, the epithelial tissue, which contains cells of different shapes and is capable of distension. Distension is just a fancy word for stretching. So think of organs that can expand, like your bladder, your stomach, the uterus in a female. So if it's able to take on a different shape and expand, it is made up of a type of tissue called transitional. And then what type is involved with diffusion? If it's going to have that, this is question 18, if it's going to be able to be involved with diffusion, it's going to have to be super, super thin. So that is going to be simple. Remember, simple is only one layer. If it's called stratified, it's multiple layers. So simple squamous. And remember, squamous are the little cells that almost look like tiles. They're very thin but square-like. So this is the thinnest type of epithelial that there is, simple squamous, and that's why it's really good at diffusion. A basement membrane occurs between epithelial tissue and connective tissue. So you'll have a basement membrane between those two. So epithelial tissue and connective tissue. And then our last question for this video, tendons actually connect bone to muscle, and then ligaments connect bone to bone. So be sure you don't get those confused. And they are both types of dense connective tissue. All right, so you should be done with questions 1 through 20. So hopefully this made sense and helped you a bunch. But just let me know if you have any questions. So once you finish this, you can continue on to the next video, which will have questions 21 through 40.